In Laboratory Reddit, today's story is
My mother-in-law called me my husband's ex-girlfriend's name at my wedding and gave me black roses. What I did in front of all the guests destroyed her forever. Yesterday was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, my wedding. For so long I had dreamed of this moment, imagining all the joy, affection, and happiness it would bring. However, instead of feeling full of joy, I found myself trapped in a nightmare. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. The biggest problem in my life right now is my mother-in-law. We just don't get along. If it were up to me, I wouldn't even have invited her to the wedding. I feel like she complicates everything, and I've never felt comfortable around her. But there's nothing I can do because my husband has a very close bond with his mother. He's like a son who's very attached to her. He adores her above all else, and although I don't always understand it, I try to be patient. The positive thing is that Ethan is not completely blind to his mother's faults. When she crosses boundaries or oversteps the mark, he does confront her. I'm grateful for that, because at least I don't feel like I'm the only one who perceives what's going on. Although we don't always agree on how to handle situations, Ethan tries to maintain harmony between his mother and me, which makes things a little more bearable. All I wanted for our wedding was for it to be a peaceful day, where Ethan and I could focus on each other, surrounded by our closest loved ones. I dreamed of a day full of love, joy, and celebration. At first, our vows ceremony was beautiful. Everything seemed perfect, and I could feel the excitement growing as our guests moved to the reception area. The music was playing, people were dancing, and everyone was enjoying themselves, exactly as you would expect at a wedding. Ethan and I were mingling with our guests, enjoying the moment, when suddenly everything changed without warning. My mother-in-law suddenly appeared in front of me, holding black roses. Initially, I didn't know what to think. She had worn a completely different dress during our vows ceremony, but she seemed to have changed into this white dress intentionally, just to provoke a reaction from me. It was a semi-sheer, floor-length dress that could easily be mistaken for a wedding dress. I was perplexed. What kind of mother wears a white dress to her own son's wedding? I had a sneaking suspicion that she might do something like this, so I had repeatedly asked her not to wear anything white at the wedding. Just for one day, I didn't want anyone to outshine me, and I think that's more than reasonable, but of course, my mother-in-law had to stand out. She was totally aware of what she was doing. I took a deep breath and tried to play it down. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of a reaction, especially not on our wedding day, but then, as if she hadn't already crossed enough lines, she came up to me, holding those black roses right in front of my face, and without hesitation she made an announcement in front of all her relatives and my friends. "These are for you. I feel that these flowers perfectly represent how I feel about your marriage, Joe." My heart sank. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. First of all, my name is not Joe. That's the name of my husband's ex-wife. Hearing her say that name, especially in front of everyone, was beyond humiliating. Not only was my mother-in-law giving me black flowers on my wedding day, but she was also deliberately calling me by the wrong name. She didn't even blink when she said this, and she seemed rather smug. Just to give some context, Joe broke my husband's heart very badly. She cheated on him with his best friend, causing him unimaginable pain in his life. Their divorce was nasty and full of drama, mainly because Joe refused to let it go. He tried every manipulative tactic imaginable to get him back, but Ethan stood his ground. He was determined to move on, although it wasn't easy. To make matters worse, he had to accept an unfair alimony agreement just to be able to get her out of his life as quickly as possible. However, the nightmare didn't end there. In a last-ditch attempt to retain him, his ex-wife used her most scandalous strategy. She claimed she was expecting a baby. Not only did she make this claim to him, she also went public with it. She announced on Facebook that she was expecting Ethan's child and even tagged him in the post for all to see. The ensuing chaos was unbelievable. Ethan's family, especially his mother, panicked and pressured him to stop the divorce proceedings for the sake of the alleged baby on the way. It was a total disaster. At that point, no one knew the real reason why Ethan was divorcing Joe. Everyone assumed it was a mutual divorce, so they kept insisting that Ethan get back with his ex. It was then that Ethan had no choice but to reveal the truth to his family, something he had been trying to avoid because it was deeply personal and embarrassing for him. He explained that his ex-wife had cheated on him and that there was a strong possibility that the baby wasn't even his. He had kept this information to himself, believing it was nobody else's business, but now he had to clarify the situation. After he explained everything, some of his relatives finally backed off and stopped pressuring him to reconcile with her, but not his mother. No, my mother-in-law redoubled the pressure on her son. She didn't care about the betrayal or the lies. She became obsessed with the idea of having a grandchild, no matter the circumstances. She even organized an intervention for Ethan, surprising him with a group of her friends to convince him to accept the child. Regardless of whether or not he was biologically his, she argued that this could be divine plan and that Ethan should see it as an opportunity to become a father. She kept talking about how much she longed to have a grandchild and tried to make him feel guilty so that he would stay connected to his ex-wife for the sake of this baby. When Ethan continued to refuse to give in, his mother was furious. She went as far as to threaten to completely cut off the relationship with him. It was a heartbreaking and outrageous situation for Ethan, but I am very proud that he did not give in. He stood firm in his decision, even though it created a permanent rift between him and his mother. Eventually, Ethan completed his divorce from his ex-wife, and the truth was later discovered. She had never been pregnant. It had all been a lie. She had made up the whole story to manipulate everyone and put pressure on Ethan to stay with her. It was shocking and outrageous, but it also gave Ethan a sense of closure. He was simply relieved to be away from her. However, once the lie was exposed, his mother realized how wrong she had been. She apologized to Ethan and worked on repairing their relationship. Although it wasn't an immediate solution, they managed to patch things up. About a year after Ethan finalized his divorce, I came into his life. We met at an airport, of all places. What started out as a casual conversation while we were waiting for a flight turned into something much more meaningful. A few days later, we met again in the city, and that eventually led to our first date, I must admit. Ethan wasn't my type at first. I wasn't immediately attracted to him, as he didn't fit the image of the kind of man I usually liked. But I couldn't deny how genuine, kind and funny he was. Over time, he completely changed my perspective on love and relationships. Now, I can say with absolute certainty that I am deeply and irrevocably in love with this wonderfully handsome man. The best part is that I know he feels the same way about me. Unfortunately, the only obstacle in our otherwise happy life is my mother-in-law. Although Ethan loves her deeply, he is also well aware of how difficult she can be. From the very beginning of our relationship, she has constantly compared me to his ex-wife. And yes, I am talking about the same woman who cheated on him, lied about being pregnant, and tried to manipulate him in every possible way. Knowing all that, you would think my mother-in-law would be happy that Ethan found someone like me. Someone who genuinely loves him and treats him with respect. But no, instead of being happy for him, she has always made me feel that I am detrimental to Ethan. Her constant comments and subtle criticisms have made it clear that, in her eyes, I am not good enough. It is disconcerting and exhausting, especially since I know how much happier Ethan is now compared to the disaster he was previously. Despite all this, I have tried to rise above her negativity for the sake of my relationship with Ethan. But her behavior has been a constant challenge. One of the main reasons my mother-in-law rejects me is because Ethan and I come from different ethnic backgrounds. For us, this has never been a problem. It's just part of who we are. And we have always accepted it, however. For my mother-in-law, it seems to be the only thing she sees. From the moment she met me, she made her feelings about our relationship clear. She often talked about how Ethan's ex-wife was much, much better for him. And one of her favorite justifications for this was that Ethan and his ex looked alike, as if that mattered in the slightest. She also kept commenting on how his ex-wife was like a daughter to her and how I could never measure up. It was a constant comparison, and no matter what I did, I felt like I could never win in her eyes. She even had the audacity to tell Ethan directly that while he might have fun with me, he should ultimately settle down with someone more to his liking. These comments didn't just hurt me, they also made Ethan angry. I always told him to stop and defended me, but my mother-in-law is relentless. I either ignored her words or ignored her completely, as if her opinion was the only one that mattered. Her disdain was not limited to conversations. Whether at birthday celebrations, family dinners, or any other event, she always found a way to belittle me. She compared me to her ex-wife in every way imaginable. She would make comments about how the ex-wife was supposedly more elegant than me, how her hair was always perfect, while mine, being naturally curly, was not so well-groomed. She even went so far as to comment on my body, saying that I had hips that were too wide for a woman. These constant attacks eroded my self-esteem. It didn't matter how hard I tried not to let them get to me. Ethan, to his credit, always defended me, but even then she wouldn't back down. So when it became clear that reasoning with her wasn't working, Ethan and I decided to defend ourselves in a more direct way. Every time she made a comment, we started to respond in kind. We didn't strive to be rude, but we no longer sat back and accepted it passively. Like when my mother-in-law would make comments about how much better Ethan's ex-wife was, he would openly say things like, "Do you think Joe was much better? Is that why he cheated on me with my best friend?" Meanwhile, I would interject with something like, "Interesting, considering that your son decided to leave her." These responses always left her embarrassed enough to shut up for a while. It wasn't ideal to have to resort to such responses, but it seemed the only way to deal with her persistent attacks. So during my wedding, when my mother-in-law called me Joe, instead of my real name, I instantly knew what she was trying to do. It was just another one of her petty attempts to upset me, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me upset. Instead, I composed myself, rolled my eyes, laughed at her comment, and gracefully accepted the black rose she handed me. I knew that acting as if she didn't matter would infuriate her more than any angry reaction. Her plan to embarrass me backfired, and I went back to mingling with our guests, ignoring her as I usually did. Then, at some later point, just as I was starting to relax, the DJ abruptly stopped the music. Everyone turned to see what was happening, and to my disbelief, I saw my mother-in-law grabbing the microphone. Now she was standing in front of everyone demanding their attention. My heart sank. Ethan and I exchanged confused looks because we had made it very clear that there would be no speeches at our wedding. We knew it was best not to give anyone, especially my mother-in-law, the opportunity to hog the attention and say something inappropriate. That was exactly why we had asked for no speeches. It was supposed to be a simple, uncomplicated celebration. Yet there she was, center stage with a microphone in her hand, about to do who knows what. I could feel the tension in the air. She appeared to have been drinking, and clearly reveled in the chaos she was creating. It was obvious that she loved the attention and the opportunity to make a scene. She began her speech with, "I know we're not allowed to give speeches, but I'm the mother of the groom, and I have every right to speak." The arrogance in her voice was infuriating. Then she had the nerve to mention that there were no such restrictions during Ethan's previous wedding, and how she preferred his ex-wife to me because of that. A collective gasp went through the room, and I saw some of my friends and family visibly stunned. My parents, sitting nearby, seemed angry with her. My side of the family had no idea that my mother-in-law always disrespected me in this way. Before anyone could react, Ethan immediately approached his mother, trying to take the microphone from her hands, but she expertly dodged him, clinging to the microphone and promising, Okay, I'll be nice, I swear. Give me a chance, please." Ethan stopped and shook his head. My mother-in-law then started to say how disrespectful it was for us to try to stop her from speaking when, in her words, all she was doing was telling the truth. She then launched into one of her usual speeches about how much she loves her son, how he is the most important thing in the world to her, how she only wants the best for him, and, of course, how I was not the best. She went on to talk about how much better she could have done than with me. It was embarrassing, but I tried to keep my composure. Then, having finished her negative comments, she turned to look directly at me with a smug smile and said, "I hope you enjoy the leftovers my real daughter-in-law left for you." My heart sank, and my face burned with humiliation and indignation. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. It was such a disgusting and deeply personal attack. Not only did she humiliate me, she also humiliated Ethan by saying something like that. The room fell silent for a moment as everyone processed her cruel words. I could see the expressions of astonishment on our guests' faces. My parents seemed ready to react, and Ethan's face flushed with a mixture of fury and embarrassment. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I held them back, refusing to give in the satisfaction of seeing me affected. My husband finally managed to wrest the microphone from his mother and turned it off immediately. At this point, my father-in-law seemed completely furious. He went up on stage, took my mother-in-law by the arm and started to lead her outside, reprimanding her vigorously as they walked away. Meanwhile, my parents and bridesmaids rushed over to my side, trying to console me. I could see the concern in their eyes, but all I could think about was how humiliated I felt, not just for myself, but also for Ethan. When I looked at my husband, I could see that he was speechless, not knowing how to remedy the mess his mother had just created. It was then that I decided that I wasn't going to let her get away with it. It was one thing for her to insult me in private, but to publicly humiliate us both on our wedding day, that was crossing the line. I wasn't going to let my mother-in-law walk away triumphant and without consequences this time. I went straight on stage. My husband looked at me in confusion as I reached out and took the microphone from his hands. The guests fell silent, their eyes fixed on me, curious as to what I was going to do. My husband was by my side, unsure but trusting me enough not to intervene. I switched the microphone back on, turned to my mother-in-law and spoke directly to her. My voice firm and clear. "Wow," I began. "That was a really impressive speech. Although, to be honest, I'm not surprised that you think Joe was better than me." My mother-in-law, who was now sitting next to my father-in-law, looked more smug than ever, clearly pleased with herself, but I wasn't finished. Just to bring everyone up to date, my husband's ex-wife cheated on him. She got involved with his best friend, broke his heart, took almost all his money, and even faked a pregnancy. And yet my mother-in-law still supports her. But you know what? I'm not that surprised. Why wouldn't you support her? After all, you and Joe have so much in common. My mother-in-law's smug expression froze as my words registered. Because for those of you who don't know, I continued now addressing the room, this woman sitting right here, my lovely mother-in-law, also had an affair. Isn't that right, mother-in-law? I gestured towards her, my voice calm but incisive. Her eyes widened and her mouth fell slightly open. I could see the color leaving her face, but I didn't stop there. "Oh, yes," I said. "She had an affair with my father-in-law behind his ex-wife's back. She was his secretary at the time, and she decided to get involved with him, knowing that he was a married man. When his ex-wife found out, she left him. And now here is my mother-in-law, pretending as if she had any moral high ground to judge." The crowd began to murmur in surprise, and my mother-in-law seemed to want to sink into her chair. Everyone on my husband's side practically knew about the affair. It wasn't a secret, but it had happened a long time ago, and most people had allowed it to fade into the past. Now she was being reminded of a shady past, and it was a significant blow to her. My mother-in-law looked completely devastated. Her face was pale, her eyes roamed the room as if looking for a way to escape. Even my father-in-law, who had been berating her earlier, now seemed to want to disappear. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of my words settle. Then I added, "Before you stand here and try to humiliate me in front of everyone, maybe you should take a good look at yourself, because you are the last person who should be judging someone else's marriage." At that moment, my mother-in-law seemed completely humiliated. Her composure completely shattered, and she seemed on the verge of tears. Without saying a word, she got up from her seat and hurried to the bathroom, clearly trying to escape the spotlight. With that, I returned the microphone to the DJ and asked him to resume the music. The party wasn't going to stop just because my mother-in-law had tried to ruin it. I walked straight over to Ethan, who looked at me with a mixture of astonishment and admiration. The crowd was momentarily silent, but I didn't care. For the first time, I felt like I had finally put my mother-in-law in her place. And honestly, it felt extraordinary. We went back to mingle with our guests, who were overwhelmingly supportive. Many of them approached me, praising how I had stood up for myself and for Ethan. They told me I had handled the situation with dignity and courage, which made me feel even better about my decision to confront my mother-in-law. It felt good to know that I wasn't alone in this. So many people saw the truth for what it was. Later, when my mother-in-law returned from the bathroom, looking somewhat more composed, but still visibly affected, my parents were ready. My mother, who had been holding back her indignation throughout the episode, did not hold back. She firmly reprimanded my mother-in-law for her behavior, calling it inappropriate and embarrassing, especially for such a special occasion. My mother ended up sternly asking my mother-in-law to leave before she embarrassed herself even more. My mother-in-law, of course, tried to argue. She claimed that her speech was nothing more than a joke, and that she was only joking with me. She went on to accuse me of crossing the line by mentioning her past, and called me bitter, and someone who lacked a sense of humor. But her excuses didn't convince anyone. The damage was done, and no one, not even my father-in-law, seemed willing to defend her at that point. Finally, my father-in-law profusely apologized to us on her behalf and escorted her out of the venue. My mother-in-law left, but not before giving me one last look of contempt, as if trying to claim some kind of power, but it didn't work. I just smiled at her, unfazed. Since the wedding, the confrontation has been the talk of the family. Everyone seems to have an opinion about it, but the majority of the comments have been overwhelmingly positive. Some guests had even recorded the exchange, and the videos have been circulating in our family group chats. Ethan and I can't help but laugh every time we see my mother-in-law's astonished expression as she delivered my speech. It has become a little private joke between us. Unsurprisingly, my mother-in-law has not taken the consequences well. She has been leaving endless voicemails on my husband's phone, but he steadfastly refuses to take her calls. It's clear that she's losing control, trying to regain some influence over the situation. In her messages, she has been insisting that Ethan make me apologize to her, claiming that my speech at the wedding crossed the line and unfairly humiliated her. According to her, not only do I owe her a personal apology, but I should also issue a public apology to set the record straight and undo the alleged damage I have caused. She has been talking about how she is now receiving criticism from family members, many of whom are apparently questioning her for her behavior at the wedding. She is presenting herself as a victim, saying that I have ruined her reputation and turned the family against her. She even has the audacity to complain about how hard she has worked over the years to make everyone in the family appreciate her and how my actions have now given them all a reason to reject her again. So Reddit AITA? Update 1. We are still in the middle of our honeymoon, and honestly, it has been a whirlwind of emotions after everything that happened with my mother-in-law at the wedding. I feel even more grateful that Ethan and I are away from all the drama right now. It's just the two of us enjoying the beginning of our married life and focusing on what really matters, our love and happiness. Let me tell you, there's no denying it. My mother-in-law is hateful, plain and simple. I have tried to give her the benefit of the doubt so many times and have made excuses for her behavior, thinking that maybe she just didn't know how hurtful she was being, but no. After everything she has said and done, it is clear that her actions are intentional. She is unpleasant and thrives on making me feel insignificant, whether it's with the dismissive comments about Ethan's ex-wife, the way she disrespected me at my own wedding, or the manipulation she has tried to exert over my husband. Her behavior speaks for itself. At this point, I don't think there is any way to reason with her or expect her to change. Fortunately, my husband is completely supportive. Honestly, I don't know what I would do without Ethan by my side. He has always been my unconditional support, but seeing how he stood up for me through all this makes me love him even more. He has made it clear, both to me and to his mother, that our marriage is a priority and that he will no longer tolerate her lack of respect for me. It's a relief to know that I'm not alone in this and that I have someone who is willing to set boundaries and protect our relationship. As for my mother-in-law, we've taken a big step to protect our peace of mind. We've blocked her. We both agree it was the best thing we could do. She's been flooding Ethan's phone with voicemails and texts demanding apologies and trying to make him feel guilty, but he's had enough. We've had enough. Blocking her felt like regaining control, like finally saying no more. We don't need her negativity, clouding this special time in our lives. Right now, it's all about us. We're focusing on our honeymoon, creating beautiful memories together, and starting our marriage on a solid foundation. The drama with my mother-in-law is in the past, where it belongs, and we are determined to keep it that way. This is our moment, and nothing can take it away from us. Update 2. Okay, so we got back from our honeymoon, and not even 2 days later, my mother-in-law showed up at our house today unannounced. She had purposely come at a time when my husband would be away, clearly hoping to catch me alone. I had just got out of the shower, and was relaxing in the living room when I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone, and as soon as I opened it, she didn't even wait for me to speak. Without so much as a hello, she barged in acting like she owned the place. "We need to talk," she said, with an air of superiority that I was all too familiar with. I asked her what she was doing here, especially without warning, and that's when she started talking about how she had been hurt by everything that had happened at the wedding. She went on to talk about how I had embarrassed her in front of the whole family and how my actions had disrespected not only her but also her son, my husband, Ethan. I couldn't believe it. Here she was, bursting into our house, demanding apologies and acting like she was the victim when she was the one who humiliated me at my wedding. But of course, she wasn't acknowledging that part. No, for her it was all about how I had made her look bad in front of the family. She clearly expected me to give in, apologize, and give her the satisfaction of hearing how sorry I was for causing such a scene. I could feel the anger building up inside me. It's ironic, really. For years she has been belittling me and comparing me to her ex-daughter-in-law, expecting me to just accept it in silence. But now that I have stood up to her, she is acting as if I am the one in the wrong. She does not seem to accept that her actions have consequences, and, instead of reflecting on her behavior, she is blaming me for the repercussions. I told her firmly but calmly that I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself, and reminded her that her own son didn't support her. In fact, he and I had decided that we wanted nothing to do with her. I needed to accept that and move on. I then asked her to leave our home, and warned that I would call the police if she didn't. My mother-in-law didn't take it well, of course. Her face flushed with anger, and she started to raise her voice, but I didn't back down either. I told her I no longer cared what she thought. I knew she was just trying to get a reaction out of me, trying to provoke me into giving in and apologizing, just as she always expected me to do, but it wasn't going to happen. His attempt to manipulate the situation and present himself as the victim was no longer going to work. In the end, he finally puffed out his chest and turned to leave, but not before making one last unconvincing threat. "You're going to regret this, you know," he said. "I'm not going to let you ruin Ethan's relationship with his family.